Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solider. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, it is always a privilege to have a guest on it I've had before. And this is a young man that I have known, well, is it okay to say, since you were 4 years old, I believe it was?
Yep, it's been a whole 3 years, John.
Yeah, that's right. I'm only 3 years older, so that I'd be happy with that. Unfortunately, it's not the case. But yeah. Jordan Matthews, how are you? First of all, a lot of stuff happening since the last we interviewed you, but one of the really positive things is you got your book out, Failure. When you have nothing, you have everything. Great title. So
thank you.
How are you, first of all? And tell me about the book and what's happening.
Well, I'm doing great. I'm living life. We were talking a little bit, kind of offline. I'm in the middle of a trial right now, and I just got back to my office. I had a bunch of client emergencies and some family stuff. I was in my office. I think I've been up since it was either 4 a.m. or I think it might've been 2 something. I don't even know. Actually, it was 2 something because I had a call with someone, a partner of mine this morning at 7 something or whatever. And I had sent him an email at 3:15 in the morning or whatever. So I've been going for a while, but I'm good. I'm in LA right now and just super busy. Just finishing up a trial this week and then going to go see some family for the holidays. And the book it's been good to get that out. It really, it actually was about a 1.5-year process in terms of putting it all together because my schedule was crazy busy. And it was interesting because obviously a lot about this, but it was tough. Obviously, my mother passed on September 25th, about 2.5 months ago. And that was a month. That was a month and a half, about 6 weeks before it came out. And she got to see, she was aware that it was coming out. She got to see certain parts of it, but it was also, a tough experience in many ways because she saw so many things that were going on and she was a big part of my journey. But it was tough for me because it didn't feel like it was right for her to kind of go right before that happened. That was a big milestone moment. Obviously, she's seen a lot of things. But at the same time, there was a part of it that actually, I think made, not that this is the purpose, but kind of made the book that much better, in my opinion, because I felt like she completed it. I wrote a dedication to her, which opened up the book, and it was basically my last letter to her, which covered, that weekend that I got the surprise news. You obviously got the surprise news as well, that she had passed, and I had to fly back to Pittsburgh very quickly, and it was a very surreal time. I spent 7 weeks back there, and she really has been such an integral part of my process and such a meaningful part of my process. And I felt a lot of love and support from her, even though I've gone through her passing, which has been difficult, but I think I've handled better than I thought I would, probably because I've dealt with this with my father. And I think that gave me a little bit of a base. But the book has been, I think the good thing is that, everyone can have their own feedback. I don't really know, but I know that what is in there is my heart and soul. I know that what is in there is, a very raw, honest, truthful encapsulation of myself, my life, my journey with close family and friends. And it encapsulates, I think, a lot of very interesting things, but in an authentic way. And the feedback that I've gotten so far from people has been, that it's been very important and meaningful and authentic to people, which is really the point. And I feel comfortable and confident that that's where it's speaking from.
Well, of course, I just want to point out for all our network marketing listeners that knew your mom, that, Jordan is Arlene Lowy's son, and my dear friend for well over 30 years, and we're both still mourning her. She was just an amazing influence, amazing person, amazing friend. I mean, I've known literally millions of people in network marketing, and your mother was unique. She just was always there. So I know you're missing her, and I know I'm missing her, but certainly not at the same level that you are. But once again, thoughts and prayers, and still getting people contacting me that are hearing from different parts of the world, and it's like, in shock. But and I know how proud she was of you. And our last interview, of course, your mom was still here, and she called me. She called me the same night, I think, that we had the interview, at like around now, like, about 10 o'clock at night. I get a phone call, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm proud of my kid." I'm like, "Well, you should be." And you've led an amazing life, and I want to talk about the book because
sure,
it's been said by lots of authors, that we read because we want to know that we're not alone. Well, I think we also write because we want people to know that they're not alone. So let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk about the resilience that you've had. You became an attorney after spending some time on the other side of the camera, on the entertainment side of it, when you first got out to LA, when you were a little bit younger. Let's talk about some of the experiences that you've had in your life. Some of them are super high profile. One of them recently that we'll talk about in a minute, but let's talk about some of the ones prior to that.
Yeah, I mean, so the book goes into a lot of, pretty raw events. One of the things that happened was, so I started as an actor, and I'll kind of jump into some of the larger deals, but I moved out to LA in 2006 from New York and was attached to a lot of projects that never were getting made. And so in the middle of the financial crisis, I ended up raising a couple $1 million and financing, producing, and starring in a film that I spent about 2 to 3 years on, that we ended up selling to Lionsgate. But it was very much so was a failing forward process. The movie bombed. We did sell it to Lionsgate, but I raised more money to do what's called a theatrical four-wall release. So we released it theatrically in New York and LA, but then we had a piracy issue right before the movie came out, about 7 weeks before the film was publicly released in, I think it was May 30th of, I think it was like 2011 at the time. And so I spent about a year in litigation, met a very good colleague of mine who was my attorney at the time and represents Tiger Woods. And he became my lawyer. And to this day, I work very closely with him, and he's an incredible lawyer. So it still opened up doors. It was a failing forward thing. It was a very tough thing. I was millions of dollars in the hole. I personally guaranteed millions of dollars. I'd maxed out my credit, but I didn't stop there. And I ended up putting together about $600 million in financing deals with two major studios, a major studio and then a mini major studio, both of which were public companies, and then another mini major studio, which was a private company that was trying to go for an IPO. They ended up going through a bankruptcy. And then I had what's called a P&A, or prints and advertising deal, for marketing with another very large public company. And I had Tom Cruise project. I had Keanu Reeves projects. I had, Jeff Bridges and Ryan Reynolds projects. I had a substantial majority of the movies in Hollywood coming through my company at the time from the studios. But then I got stuck in my business partner's divorce, and, he owned 25% of my company at the time, which meant that his wife, California Community Property, she owned 12.5% of my company. But it was, that was how I ended up transitioning over to law after I met my wife and kids. One of the projects we had was with Walter Isaacson, who wrote the book Steve Jobs. So that was like the hit sort of book at the time. We had a project for one of his books that was set up over at Sony with Alec Baldwin attached to it. And that got kind of tied up in the whole divorce proceedings as well. So that was that. But we were launching at that time a full-fledged studio, and I was 27, 28 at the time. So I was relatively young, and was going really for everything. But it completely, after the litigation that I dealt with and the everything falling apart on the original film that I put millions of dollars into, and putting more millions of dollars additionally into this, and this imploding, and then having to start over where I had to move out of my house. I had to turn in my car. I had a family. I had a daughter who had just been born. I decided to go back to school, and when I went to law school, I had to complete college, 2 years of my college degree during my first year of law school while my son was born, to transfer to another law school. I gave up, 3 years of income, was able to, finish at the top of my class the first year, and then transferred to a better law school, got a master's degree, finished early, took the bar. I didn't pass it the first time. I had my entire family living with me, my sister-in-law, my nephew. It was just an incredibly stressful pressure cooker of life. I had to move out of my house like a week before the bar exam because everyone got sick, and I had to stay in a motel and sleep on a friend's couch and all that stuff. And then when I didn't pass it, I missed by a few points. It was incredibly depressing because my mother actually had just flown in to go to my law school graduation, which was like a week later. So it was like kind of a bittersweet that I'm graduating from law school and I just had failed the bar exam. And, but then I had to spend $7,000 on a credit card that I didn't have at the time, right? Because I had depleted all my finances to hire a private tutor. Did that, retook the test. It was like a 6-month process. I passed. And then the law firm that I was at, pushed me out, handed me a check for $3,000 probably around this time. This could be the anniversary. It was about 5-6 days before Christmas.
Wow.
And that was literally 5 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. And within about 2 weeks, I renegotiated a deal. It was at a new firm, but I had to build everything from the ground up with all my relationships. And within about 4 or 5 months, I originated the Wynn case against Steve Wynn in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein fallout that came from the Wall Street Journal sort of bombshell expose. It was the largest case against a CEO of a public company who had to step down as the chairman of the Republican Finance Committee, and that's been about 4.5 years of very intense litigation. We've been to the Ninth Circuit, the U.S. Supreme Court, and there's been a lot of investigations that have been tied into it. So all of that stuff is to say that, the meaning and the purpose, all that sort of fancy stuff or whatever, I guess, is interesting and it's cool. But it's really, I guess, more about, the dedication that I wrote. It was interesting. So when my mom passed on September 25th, and this is how it's all related. And fortunately, about 2.5 weeks after 2.5 weeks before she passed, I went back to Pittsburgh. And I only go back once a year. Usually my mom would come out. And I went back kind of, by chance. Had an amazing week with her. Just her and I. And, we went on walks together. We sat out on her deck and just had, dinner together. I don't know if I told you the story, but it ended up kind of going into this dedication that I wrote to her. But so I'm there, and there she has a den in the first floor, and there's it's like a TV room. And anytime I came to visit, I would, come and just relax. It was my way to decompress. I'd sit on the couch, I'd lay on the couch, I'd turn on some movies, and I would just relax because I always go 24/7. And that was my I'm just going to chill out. And she would be in the house. She would come in, she would make food. She's a mom, and she'd be in the house, and it was really nice. And so one night, I think it was the first or second night I came or whatever, I guess I maybe fell asleep with the TV on. I woke up, it was off. And it turns out that the TV got busted, the light bulb, whatever. The bulb blew after 20 years. I mean, it was time to go. But the point of that was that she was telling me, she's like, she wanted me to watch this movie. And the movie she wanted me to watch was, King Richard, with the Will Smith movie, Serena Williams, and her Richard Williams and all that stuff. And, being in LA and being in the entertainment space for the past like 17 years, you get kind of jaded. And I'm like, I don't really watch that much stuff because I see all the behind the scenes stuff and I see the marketing campaigns and the politics and the business of it, which is interesting, but it kind of takes away from some of the story. But anyways, she really wanted me to watch it, right? So we went up in her room one night and I'm sitting on a chair and we started watching the movie, and I'm watching this movie and I'm watching this story of this father, like just doing whatever he had to do for his daughters to make it and to go take on the world and become what they had become. And I sat there and I looked over at my mom, and she's sitting on the corner of her bed. I'm sitting in her chair, and I just looked over and she's like leaning intently forward, watching this, just like hypnotized by this, like focused on this, right? But what I recall about like that moment is it like reconnected me with the way that I was brought up. Like that's how fortunate I was that I had someone like that. I watched that and I was watching this movie and I'm like, that's what this woman, that's what this person did for me. Like that's what they did. And what she reinforced, and I look at it in everything I do now, and I see it so much more clearly. She reinforced, she built such a level of confidence, of self-esteem, of self-belief. And I would even go back. I've even gone back and I've watched her videos, on her Market America videos, whenever she's like, because she was at the top of Market America, she's on a magazine just like you. And like, you guys were like the heavy, you guys have always been the heavy hitters and all that stuff. And I'm like, I grew up with this just superstar mother who loved everything about me, and how unbelievably fortunate I was for that. But I was so reminded of every single thing I have done, because there's been so much pain, right? So much failure. And I've talked to people recently and I hear the pain that they go through, right? I hear the failure that they go through, and what they have or what they don't have, what they experience often that I didn't have, is they have this constant rejection and this lack of a base that tells them that they're nothing, right? That they're a nobody, that they're nothing, they can't do it, it's a pipe dream, whatever you want to talk about, right? And she instilled the exact opposite in me, so that any time I have failed at something, and that was the whole premise of the book, right? Failure, is when you have nothing, you have everything. And I would push myself to points of just breaking, like legitimately breaking, where I've told people things like, putting myself on the verge of bankruptcy and litigation and practical divorce, and just losing everything in my life and estranging myself from people that were no longer the right people for me, and just cutting people out of my life and being ruthless, but very kind of like spiritually connected to like believing what I'm doing, fully believing what I'm doing. But it was so reinforced from her. And all of those failures, every single time that I failed forward, was so much because of her. Because every single time someone said no to me, I didn't listen. Or I said, absolutely, I know I'm going in the right direction. For everyone else, they hear no and they're like, damn it, I'm going in the wrong direction. Every time I heard no, I'm like, this is what it takes. In fact, every single time she brought me up with this mindset, this unbelievable mindset of like this multi-billionaire mindset. And it wasn't even about the money. It had nothing to do with the money. It had to do with, if you believe, if you've created that, you're not attached to a job, right? You're not attached to, am I going to please this person? Is this person going to accept me? Are they going to fire me? Are they going to terminate me? Am I going to be able to take care of my family? I'm going to do whatever. No, you don't care about that, because most people look at people who have this, extraordinary level of whatever you want to call success, and they're like, oh, they're lucky. I'm like, no. You look at the details. I'm not saying that everyone wants it, but the reality is they've been divorced, they've lost loved ones, they've lost businesses, they've failed, they've gone bankrupt, sometimes multiple times over. They've been and that is, and once you start to accept that that's actually like what life is, and you stop looking at it like I have problems, and you start realizing you're like, no. This is normal. This is what it is to be alive and make stuff happen and move forward. Then there's no room for depression. There's no room for sadness. You're like, I'm doing it. I'm making it happen. And it really started so much with her.
When you look at it from that standpoint, okay, I'll give you two, for instances, and love your reaction to this, Jordan. When I was a kid, I was about, 17, 16, something like that. There was a guy living down the street from me, and his name was Frank Wright, and he started a little company called Floramics, and he's an interesting guy. He got to Syracuse University, engineering degree, but he always wanted to be an inventor. Mm-hmm. And his son and I were friends, and so I'd always see this guy out underneath a car hood, all kinds of weather, nighttime, daytime, weekends, always out there playing under a car hood. And I walked down the street and I said, Mr. Reich, I said, his son had told me that he had just had this product that he had launched and with tremendous success in the automotive industry. And anyway, I walked down the street. It was called Tufoil, Tufoil. Still out, by the way. I don't know if Mr. Reich's still alive. I'm assuming he's probably gone, but his kids are still certainly alive. But anyway, point being, I walked down the street. I said, Mr. Reich, I said, congratulations. Your son told me, about the success of your product. And he looked up for a second from the car. He said, yeah, and kept working. He said, yeah, I'll give you some advice if you want it. I said, sure. I'll take advice. Anybody's successful, right? Because my father wasn't successful, so I'm going to take this guy's advice. He said, I had a lot of well-meaning people told me, you should just take a job. You got an engineering degree, blah, blah, blah. He said, but I kept persevering. He said, I have hundreds of inventions, hundreds of patents. This is the first one that really hit it big for me. And he had to be at least 50, I would say, at the time. So, I'm 17, 16, whatever I am. And that was such a good example. Fast forward down the road, probably about 20 years ago, here in Dallas, Fran Tarkenton, the old quarterback, 4 Super Bowls, comes to town. And Fran had written a book, What Failure Taught Me About Winning. I think it was the title of it. I may have the title wrong. If I do, I apologize. But something along that line. And I wound up sitting at the table with him, because I had done a certain level of production in the company I was in. So I got to sit at this breakfast table with Fran Tarkenton. And of course, I was a Giants fan, still am. So, I remember when he was a Giants quarterback. He was Vikings quarterback he got famous for. But of course, he was a Giants quarterback for a few years. So I said, anyway, so we're talking, and he was promoting his book. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, those 4 Super Bowls is what made me. Now, some people might say, well, you lost 4 Super Bowls. Well, he got to 4 Super Bowls, first of all. Not too many guys can say that. He's in the Hall of Fame. Not too many people can say that. He might be 5'10" if he's lucky. And most of these quarterbacks today are, 6'3", 6'4". Right. They're monsters, right? But the point was that all the success that he had a lot of success in business, by the way. And his dad was I think he was a Baptist preacher. And his dad told him, well, if you don't make the NFL, what are you going to do with your life? So in college, he had started an insurance company. And, long story short, the guy had all this business success. Like we think of him, you or I would think of him as a quarterback. The guy's a business guy, right? He was equally good businessman as he was a quarterback. But let's come back to that. Whether it was Frank Reich or whether it was Fran Tarkenton. I love the concept of your book because a lot of times, especially network marketing, right, which most of my audience listening to our interviews, right? Yeah. They want to hear about the person making a fortune, and they want to hear about all the success. Like that person, they started the business last week and now they're making X amount of dollars per month and they have this great life and they're living in a big house and driving fancy cars. That's a bunch of crap. The reality is most of us struggled. Your mom struggled. I struggled. We struggled to pay the bills. We struggled, right? You struggled. Yep. Okay. And you have struggled. What, if you had to narrow it down, all the experiences, including at one point going to bartending school where you thought, hey, I just need to make a living, take care of my obligations, right? Yep. Where you were at, okay, all of that stuff that's happened, even what's happened to you recently, right? Because I know now you lost your mom, you lost your cousin recently as well, unexpectedly, right? Your family's been through tremendous turmoil this year. All the stuff. Somebody's listening to this and they're struggling with life, with business, with marriage, maybe with relationships, with whatever it happens to be. What 3 things can you tell them that are game changers to hang in there till tomorrow to make it a new day? Well, what are those 3 things?
So that's interesting. That's a great question. And I don't know, this is an interesting timing thing. I don't know if this is really the answer that you're sort of looking for. And obviously we didn't talk about this question or whatever, but it's really interesting that you asked that. And I'll tell you why, because so I was, I had some movers at my house yesterday, right? And this guy who I'm working with, who was helping with the move, there was something about him that I was this guy, nothing wrong with moving. That's awesome. Fantastic. I mean, this guy was a hustler. I mean, that's all that matters, right? But he had such a mentality that I was this guy could be doing a lot of stuff, right? And we started connecting and really talking. And we talked about things on a very authentic level. I actually ended up giving him my book. And I don't really like to do that because I feel I'm not trying to self-promote. I'm not trying to say read my book because I don't really care about that. It was more I felt we would be on the similar wavelength. Right. And maybe there might be some connection there or some way that something that might be drawn from it. So I don't know that these are the 3 specific things, but this is something that I was thinking of as you were talking. And I was I kind of want to talk about this. I was saying to him, as I said, I believe in 3 things, right? Which is show up early, leave late, and walk the old lady across the street. And he was that was so simple, but that was perfect. There were, or something it was, we had this moment that was we were laughing and we were just or whatever. But, I believe in helping people that help themselves. Right. I believe that, this is again, kind of tangentially related, but there was a couple of years ago, there was an college intern who was at my office, college baseball player, great attitude, incredible guy, young kid, 21 at the time. So I was at the time, I think I was maybe 36 to his 21 or whatever. And one night I'm working on Discovery and I was bringing him into big depositions with NBA players and all kinds of stuff going on. Because he had this work ethic. I didn't care whether he was from whatever law school or whatever, because he wasn't. And there were some other people that I probably could have pulled into it. But this guy had such an incredible attitude, such a I will show up and I will do whatever it takes. Whatever you give me, I will do, and I will do it 110% or whatever you want to call it. And just with a smile on my face, but authentically, I'm grateful, right? And so I'm working on a Discovery deadline and it's 11:10, 11:30 at night or whatever. And I got to get home so that I can get up at 2:30 in the morning because I had a bunch of other deadlines. So I was going to go home and sleep for an hour and a half. Not suggesting that people should necessarily do that. Although I can tell you that I often do that because I love what I do. I love what I do. So it's not I'm always kind of going. And I sleep and I catch up when I need to. But this guy, I told him, I said, you don't need to go home, whatever. And he was no. He stayed. And the next morning I saw him he's like, or the next day at some point I saw him and he's like, I have this story for you. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? And he kind of indicated it was like kind of a story that like I would have done or something that I would have done. He's like, he had been there until like, I think almost 2:30 in the morning, and he had to mail it out, but he couldn't actually get down in the elevator because he had to have a security key card. So he went out the front doors, and in order to actually get to the mailbox, he had to like crawl under the gate in the parking garage, right? And he crawled under, was able to get through, was able to go all the way down, drop everything in the mail and all that stuff, and then came back and had to crawl under the parking garage again or whatever until he, got out and then like got his car. And I looked at him, and to this day, I mean, I've been his mentor and a friend of his, and he's in law school. He's doing incredibly. He's about to graduate. He's got a great position at a place. He's like getting every award left and right. I don't care that that's what it's about, but what I do love is, I mean, he had this amazing mentality, and the whole point was really interesting is I remember his first semester, I think he got his first grades and he didn't do that well, right? He didn't do that well or what he expected. And this kid just went back and hustled like crazy. And at the end of the semester, he told me, I wasn't expecting this because he's a smart kid, but I knew what like his LSAT scores were. And I was like, okay, you're doing fine, but there are some stronger ones. And he finished at like the top of his class, wow. Just because of his will. Like he just had to figure it out. And he is basically at the top of his class. And it's because of it, it's that attitude and that willpower. So going back to that show up early, leave late, walk the old lady across the street, I think that whole story kind of encapsulates everything. It's like I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how talented you are. I don't care how athletic you are. I don't care what school you went to. I don't care any of that stuff. Usually what you find is the people who have the most meaningful level of success, they have this insatiable hunger to strive for personal development. They're not doing it for someone else. They're doing it because they're doing it for themselves, and or for a family or something like that. But they're also like challenging themselves. They're competing with themselves. And so showing up early and leaving late isn't even in the conversation. It's just automatically a part of their personality because they will do whatever it takes. And then it's mixed with like, walk the old lady across the street, that ethic, the ethics, the integrity of doing the right thing, that, yeah, you might have an opportunity to slight someone and get ahead, but you say, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, this is not right or whatever. You don't take the shortcut. You do it the right way. And so when you ask that question, that's what comes to me.
Man, well, that's folks, we didn't practice this, and I could not think of a better answer or analogy because think about it. Everybody you've known in your life, everybody that you've watched be successful, everybody I've watched be successful, that's been their attitude, including your mother. Okay.
Yeah.
Including your grandfather, who I knew a little bit. Okay. That was right. Their attitude. It was like, hey, get there early, work your butt off, and go home late. Go home when the job's done, not look at your watch and say, well, and that's the difference between people that succeed in this world is philosophically, they're not sitting there, the hourly employee looks at their watch because they want the day to be over.
Right.
The entrepreneur or the great athlete, the great entertainer, the great musician, the great business person, it's let's get it done. I've worked with researchers in the medical field with the company I've been with now for 26 years. And there's one guy, he's kind of funny. He always says, you should have been a medical researcher because my question, everything is why. And I'll sit there for hours listening to somebody talking about stuff I don't even understand necessarily. But because I got to know why, you know what I mean? So I get it. And walking the old lady across the street, don't forget, we're human beings. We're only here for so long. And that's the stuff that really matters, down the road is, if you run the old lady over, that's not the way to be. Walking across the street.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And love it. So let's talk a little bit about the book. So the book is launched.
Yep.
And just a couple of weeks now. And this will air. We're doing this a couple of days before Christmas, everybody. This will actually air on January 24th. So we got a month lead time. It's for you all to get your book. So I know where to get it, but why don't you tell them where to get it, how to get it, and why to get it, most importantly.
Well, I mean, right now it's up on Amazon, so you can get it on Kindle. There's also paperback is the easiest way to get it. It's going up on a couple other sites as well, but the easiest way to get it is to go up to Amazon and pick up a copy. The reason why, I guess I would say it like this: when my mom passed away, this is why. When my mom passed away, I went up to Facebook, and I don't have Facebook, right? But I went up to her account. I had her phone, and which we still do, and I went up to her phone. It was linked to her Facebook, and I saw all this outpouring of messages, and all people were sharing, wonderful thoughts about it, right? And there was this one message that really stuck to me. And it was this guy, I don't remember the full details, but he was saying his first interaction with my mom was that he had been at this conference. It was his first time, and he didn't know what he was doing there. And my mom, who was such a big part of, had been such a high level in not only Market America, but in network marketing in general, like you, came up to him and just said, "You're going to be big, kid. You're going to be this, you don't even know yet, but you're going to make it huge and you're going to do so great." Right. And so he's like, "You have no idea how much that moment helped me get through any of the tough times." Right. That those, not only those words of wisdom, but that like sense of like genuine love and acknowledgement and seeing someone. Right. And that's what my mother had a real talent for, is really seeing the potential in people before it was actualized. She had this amazing thing that she really genuinely cared. Right. And that's what she did for me. And so I go back to this conversation I had yesterday with this guy who was helping me move. I felt like, and I've definitely lived this way in my life at many moments, and I realize it comes from my family, and it definitely comes from her in so many ways, is this wanting to see the best in someone, but truly see what they can be, and giving them the strength of character to really like make a change in their life and do something. Sometimes they are just stuck in their environment. And look, I mean, like, a book is a book. You don't have to get the book. You can do whatever you want. It is what it is. But I can honestly say, and I don't like to sell things. I don't like to do any of that stuff. But I can honestly say in the most raw, personal way, that this is an authentic story of myself, of what I've gone through, which has been incredibly, incredibly painful. But the perseverance that I was taught from my mother is the through line that is such a big part of it, and from my father, right? And I lost him when I was 19, and he was, when he passed away, I learned such a crucial message from him, which I really felt as though he let go to allow me to live forward. He was struggling with alcoholism, and he really, him leaving and him dying really compelled me, especially at that point in my life, to move forward. But I do firmly believe that it's like when I gave this book to this guy, it wasn't about like self-promotion. It wasn't about like me, or look at the book that I've written, or look at what I've done. Like it wasn't about that, nor do I want this to be about that. Like, that's not why I did this. I did this because years ago, when I was working with someone who was a therapist who became a consultant, we would talk about all these crazy stories, all these things that were going on that are just like these insane, crazy stories. But he would watch me take one hit after another, which is what I watched my mom take. One hit, massive hit, top of the company, thrown out, sleeping on people's couches, doing whatever it takes, building organizations to have them blow up, financing things, and so that you're helping other people and then they turn on you or whatever the case. And the through line is that it is intended for someone to actually read a true, authentic story that I think will speak to people and give them a sense of meaning, a sense of inspiration, a sense of why. And the last point I will say is exactly that. You constantly say why. And in a direct connection with that, that's what my mother did. But the different point was she always would say to people that I was her why, right? And I think of that. It was that she had this inspiration, and I feel so grateful that I was a part of that process. And once you find that, I think that this book and this story encapsulates what you can do when you truly find your purpose. And that's the message that, the book is really all about.
Wow. Well, I'll just add one thing. Watching you grow up from the time you were really just a really little guy, first time I ever came to Pittsburgh, to your mother's house, and you were her wife. You were the reason that she got up, and with all the stuff that she went through, that you know about, that I know about, and some other people know about, and not just the business stuff, but the health stuff. And there was no time I talked to your mother, including near the end, when she didn't know it was the end. I didn't know it was the end. And there was no time your mother wouldn't end the conversation saying, "Love you, John, you got to go." And whether it was a 2-minute conversation or a 2-hour conversation, it was always that way. And going back to watching you, when you were at school, we'd be working, and all of a sudden it would be like, okay, she could flip that switch from entrepreneur to mom. Yeah. And then you would come home from school, and I'd continue with the business stuff that we were doing, and she'd be like, "Hey, I gotta do my mom thing." Yeah. Go do your mom thing. She knew how to do that, and not everybody does, because you were always her first priority. No matter what else was going on in her life, her career, her business, it was like, hey, I'm a mom first. And I had so much respect for that. And of course, I didn't become a parent myself until many years later. And I did not do anywhere near as good a job. But I can tell you one thing I learned from your mother, one of many things, is I was in Colombia. Our company had just opened down there. And my son called me. I'm just about to go on stage in front of, 400 people, 500 people, whatever it is. And I don't speak Spanish well at all. And my son calls me, and he was in Ottawa, Canada. And he said, "Dad, I'm scared to blank." He said, "This team's huge. We're playing physically huge." He's like, "What do I do?" I go, "Well, you do what you know how to do, what you've been trained to do, but you do what you fear most." Mm-hmm. And a couple hours later, my wife was at the game, and she sends me a text of him scoring his first goal in Canada. This was in October of whatever year it was. Right. And I talked to my son later that night. Of course, he was, he was thrilled he scored, and the team lost. They were a terrible team he was on. But anyway, he shared with me that, and I could tell he was depressed. And so I finished that meeting, and I booked a flight at 6:00 the next morning from Colombia to Toronto, which was still a 4-hour drive to where he was going to school. Oh, wow. And I showed up for practice that day. And I'll never forget this, Jordan. I came out of the men's room, and he was coming in. He was supposed to be a few minutes later than that, and it was just perfect timing. Yeah. And he jumped in my arms. And he was still a little boy then. He was still, he was a freshman in high school. So what was he? Sure. He's 19 now. So 14, 15. 14, something like that. And he was just so happy I was there. Yeah. Well, if I was never around your mother, it would have been like, "Hey, kid, just tough it out, man. Come on, you're a hockey player. You're you're up there for a reason, and do your thing." It was like, I could tell my kid needed me. My kid needed me more than my business needed me at that point. That's awesome, right? And so, that was something I learned from your mother. But let's go back to you, because you learned a lot more probably than I did, certainly all those years. If you had to encapsulate one thing from your mother, one of all the hundreds of things, And now, be it as a parent, be it as an entrepreneur, be it as a leader in your profession, what would it be?
I'd like to say that I just have like an answer that just comes to me in a moment. She was the most loyal, loving and caring individual I've ever known. And I think when I know what it is to be truly loved by someone. And I feel very grateful for that. I never felt like anything I did was conditional with her. She made it very clear to me that I was, her main focus regardless of anything. But the journey together was, it's hard to say the word was, amazing. There's a big part of me that actually still does feel very uniquely like she's still with me very much. I do feel that, not in like a overly esoteric way, but I really feel like the essence of her is with me. And I have her ashes actually ironically on a necklace that I'm wearing right now, which is kind of, it's kind of bizarre in many respects. But I know her level of loyalty. I mean, she never stopped believing in me. I think that is the biggest thing. I mean, she always believed in me. She believed that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. And everything that I've actualized is so much a function of her belief in me and her love in me. And I think that's really the message. It's amazing what you can do when you not only find your purpose, but when you kind of pay it forward, and that's what she often did. She always saw the best in others and really shared a level of strength of character with other people that she didn't even know in a very selfless way. And we had a service that you were at my house, and my mother's was Jewish, my father's Catholic, and we had a rabbi at the service, and I can't remember the exact words, but she was kind of like talking about, doing things the way that my mother, Arlene, would do things. And so I'm trying to really live that message, which is to selflessly try to give to other people, not about, not having it be about myself, but really about that same message of, I love, like, even, and I go back to this guy yesterday. I thought to myself, like, I texted him afterwards. I gave him a tip and all that stuff. And I could tell it was like really important for his family and his son, his 2.5-year-old son. And I told him, he's like, thank you so much. It's so helpful and all that stuff. And I told him, I said, you have my number, like feel free to stay in touch. Like I told him, I was like, stay in touch if you need anything, if I can help you in any way, shape, or form. And I told him, I said, you have great things that you can do. And I didn't have to say that. I meant it. And I have no idea how much of that means to that guy, or if it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it'll light some sort of fire. He did say to me during the course of the conversation that he felt like he felt like, there was a purpose, and like that sometimes you come across people and you meet someone and they just like they reset you in some sort of way. I mean, that's the golden life. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, in living that message from my mother and the experiences and message and strength from my father, it's great to have a career that I've built and to continue to build that and to focus on kind of building a legacy and something I'm proud of and do work that I love and that I'm proud of. But I think the most important work is really encapsulated in the message of this book, which is not only to just pay it forward, but to lift other people up and to show them that they can lift themselves up. And the last point I would make, which is directly related to my mother, is a big part of this was wanting to pull back the curtain on success, because I think people have this perception, maybe not as much anymore, but I think in many ways they do, that, when you're successful, it's because you're lucky or whatever the case is. And it's really about bringing back that mentality of doing whatever it takes to make things happen and helping yourself, and knowing that you have the ability to make choices in your life that they may be hard, they may be difficult, you may not get the result you want, but you have the ability to make that choice and you have the ability to move forward, and no one is necessarily going to do it for you.
Exactly. Hand up instead of a handout.
Yep.
Exactly.
It's true.
Failure, when you have nothing, you have everything. Great title. Can't wait to finally get a chance to read my autographed copy. And I know how proud your mother is of you. We talked so many times, and you know how important you were. But let's have a little bit of fun here going away from this call. Okay, let's go back to the rabbi there.
Oh yeah,
in Pittsburgh, because I have a few remembrances of that day. Before I get to the funny one, though, I did meet your other grandparents. I met your dad's parents. They were sitting up by me, and wonderful people. I enjoyed meeting them, and you know it says so much about your mother, because your grandmother made a point to say to everybody, "Hey, even though you know Arlene and my son were divorced, we were still his grandparents, and Arlene never had any issue with anything, time or anything else of you spending with them," which spoke a lot about your mom and the kind of person that she was, that, hey, this didn't work out, but these people are still really important to my kid, and it said a lot about your mom. But here's the funny one. So I always thought I was special, which I know I was very special to your mom, but I always thought being Johnny was like a big deal, because nobody, my own mother never called me Johnny, you know?
Yeah.
Which was kind of funny, because my Swedish grandfather's name was Jan, and they used to call him Yanni, which I never met. He was dead before I was born. So he was Johnny, but I don't know. I was always John. And I'm not even Jonathan. I'm just John, right? And anyway, but your mom always called, from the day I met her, 30 some odd years ago, Johnny. And and that was always special to me. It was like Arlene was, I was always Johnny. And the rabbi said, "I hate to tell you this, Johnny, but everybody in Pittsburgh, we had an IE." So I had to tell people that. I said, all these years, I thought Arlene just I was really special, but I didn't know Ron was Ronnie, and your brother Ed was always Eddie. Right. It was just normal. So I had a good laugh about that. But
yeah, they would always call me always call me Jordy. I was I never really thought much about it, because it's it's your family. It sounds so childish. I'm okay, yes, some Jordy, whatever, or something like that. But it was, it's just what my family always called me. So yeah.
Exactly. But it was tragic, and yet I know your mom would have been not only proud of you, but proud of her brothers that day too, her three brothers, and that everybody just came together to remember what a remarkable person she was, remarkable life that she had. But let's talk about one other thing, because you and I have so much in common, bad and good. We both both had alcoholic fathers, for better or worse, and that does forge you in steel sometimes, because you have to be a little bit tougher in a lot of respects than some of the other kids that don't have that situation, right?
Yeah.
But one of the other things that we have in common is our constant asking why is led us both to the cold water.
Oh yeah.
And I've been working now with a group of people in my company, introducing them to Wim Hof and the whole cold water therapy and everything else. So I know you've been doing that on your end for a while too. Why don't you just talk about that for a minute, how it's helped you, especially with some of these late hours that you're putting in?
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I've been doing it for years. I would take cold showers, and actually, a lot of it links back to my father, because I had some really extreme experiences with him, and they were very shocking experiences. And he was an amazing person and a loving father. He just, he struggled with what he struggled with. And I grew up, I think, a lot quicker because of that. But there were some shocking experiences. And I think there's a correlation, because that cold is very shocking. I ended up getting into it when I started getting into, I think, meditation, probably at least a decade ago or so. But yeah, we were talking about this before. I have a friend of ours who was talking to me like probably 2 days ago about the fact that he just started doing this cold showers like in the morning, and he's like swearing by it. He's like, it's amazing how much more productive he is and the energy he has and how much more clearly he thinks. And, obviously you've been doing this for a long time, but it is, I mean, like it's kind of like a secret weapon, for lack of a better term. I mean, it not only makes you feel amazing. I mean, there is a legitimate endorphin, dopamine, trigger that goes off with it. But my synapses click more quickly. My brain, I can connect thoughts much more quickly. I'm much more clear-headed, articulate, for lack of a better term. And not that I wouldn't be without it, but all of the clutter, I think here's what it is that the best and most simple way to say it is that it's like when you start your day with that, or even if you do it at any other point in the day, everything else seems much less difficult, and your ability to handle things is emphasized. And I think it's largely about, I think there is a physiological experience. Like your nerves become stronger. Your capacity to handle stress becomes stronger physiologically, and so you handle things in a much more graceful way. It's very difficult to be upset and sad after it. I mean, when you're doing it, sometimes, especially at first, like you're like, why am I doing this? And like, especially if you've never done it before, it's going to be shocking. But now I can't go a day without doing it, and especially when it's done, I mean, I just feel alive, like so awake, and it's amazing. So yeah, I swear by it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's funny because I always did it just after a workout the last couple of years since I started it. And sure. Then after your mom's funeral, a couple of weeks later, I was in Reno for a powerlifting meet. And it happened to be, Reno's next to Lake Tahoe, which, sure. Not only beautiful, but a lot on my mind. Including, of course, your mom's passing. And so I'm up there, by myself. My wife and kids were back here. And I went to Lake Tahoe after weigh-ins. Like you go and you weigh in a day before you do these things, right? So I did that, and it was like, man, I sped up there. It was about an hour ride from Reno up to Lake Tahoe to find a spot that you can go in.
Right.
I went in there, and the water was surprisingly not that cold. I mean, it wasn't cold to me. I mean, like there's people with winter coats on the beach looking at me like, what is this guy doing in the water? And I'm in there, I'm taking pictures of myself and selfies. I'm posting them. And of course, the next day after I lifted, what did I do? I mean, I literally sped out of the meet. I was actually frustrated at the meet because it was supposed to start at like 10 in the morning. It started at noon. I didn't get out until 4 o'clock. And of course, it's getting later in the year, so the sun's going down. I'm like, man, I got to get over Lake Tahoe. I can get in the water. So, of course I did again. But I made a proclamation right then. I said, you know what? I need to do this first thing in the morning. Like literally just roll out of bed. And I have a pool, fortunately. Sure. So it's like now it's like literally I roll out of bed, 5:30, 6:30, whatever time it is, I get up. And it is right in the pool. I mean, like I do my bodily functions, and literally I go to the pool. I bring my 2 dogs with me. They run around and do their business, and I'm in the pool. I swim 4 laps. I spend an extra 3 minutes. And to your point, the rest of the day, I'm alive, I'm awake. And it's like whatever else I got to do that day is not going to be like getting in 54-degree water. I might have some challenges in a day, but it's not going to be like that. And it's funny, but I know we both had people who have kind of converted to this that thought we were nuts that are now saying, oh yeah, WIM's part of my day, or cold water therapy, or whatever you want to call it. But just to wrap up, Jordy, I know I'm sorry, I called you Jordy.
That's all good.
I'm trying to be serious for the interview. I've known you as Jordy since you're 4, but Jordan.
Is that weird? Is that weird for you?
It is weird.
Call me Jordan.
It is. Yeah. But hey, what's 2023 look like for you? I know you got a lot going on. Know the family stuff's going on and all of that. But what's your goal this year? What are you going to accomplish in 2023? You've had some amazing things in 2022. You've had some challenges, obviously, but you also had some tremendous success. I mean, you're a high-powered attorney now in the world that you're dealing in. I mean, you're dealing at the top echelon, so to speak. What's 2023 look like?
It's good that someone thinks so. I'm doing what I love to do. I'm continuing to do, very high profile, high level litigation that I really enjoy. I enjoy the complexity and the challenges, and we're, doing stuff like that. I'm going to continue sort of, I think, having conversations about this book that I really more from a perspective of trying to help other people, and a big focus on that. I have another book that I'm in the process of putting together that is going to be tied to some of the, large, matters that I've handled that are going to be, it's going to be interconnected with that. I'm working on a speaking opportunity right now, so doing some more in that realm, but really just. Yeah, it's a bit of a sky's the limit. I mean, I'm doing every single thing that I want to do, and it continues to grow, and new opportunities come up every single day. So I'm just growing and continuing to grow and working on amazing things. We'll see what I decide to do in the future. I'm having conversations with people. I'll just sort of leave it at that. But everything is continuing to grow. My practice is growing. My family is growing, and definitely, I think that's the last thing I will say is there is a big part of me that I have spent so much of my life really career oriented, and that's great. And I'm doing it because it's very purpose driven and what I love. And I have also, I love my family tremendously, and want to give them a wonderful life. And another part of it, which is actually, not been as much, and I can admit that I'm really trying to focus on is spending some really good quality time. You and I were texting about this the other couple weeks ago, really wanting to take some time, and I'll finish with a thought, take some time and appreciate and enjoy the people around me. Not to go too long, but this is kind of an important point, I think, when you ask about that. But a month before my mom passed, she gave me a call, and I was in my office. I was in this office, I was sitting in this chair, and she says, "Well, Jordy, she says, might want to stop and smell the roses." And I, in a pretty cold manner, I said, "Who died?" Right? Mm-hmm. And she said, J.R. Ridinger, right? The CEO of Market America.
I remember that. Yeah. Oh.
And I said, "What happened?" And I don't know if she knew the full details. I think it later was, apparently, I guess from what I understand, I'm not totally sure. What my understanding is that he was on a conference call, and he got up and he just had a pulmonary embolism and dropped dead, right? Mm-hmm. And honestly, when I heard that, I was pretty cold to it. I mean, I take nothing away. I feel my sympathies to his family. They were so kind and generous to me when my mom passed. So it was nothing personal in any relationship whatsoever. But I think it was, kind of a bit of that coldness that I've developed. Meaning, I have an open heart, but you have to be very tough and resilient in order to deal with a lot of pressure at times. And so my perspective was, well, that's part of life. It's tough. I'm sorry to hear that, but I got to hop on a conference call and I got to handle some stuff. And when my mom passed, one of the benefits I had, and this goes back into the year of 2023, on top of everything else that I'm doing, is I had the benefit of, I went back to the house, and I was there with my family, and I had the opportunity to kind of work remotely for a bunch of weeks. And I would be in the middle of, a client matter, a motion, a deadline, getting some serious things together. And I would just have some moments where I would sit up, I'd stand up, and I'd go and I'd walk out to the deck. There's this big tree, and I would just look. There's a bunch in the front yard, across the street, and it was the fall time. It was really beautiful. Leaves were changing colors. And, being in LA for a long time, I wasn't used to sort of the East Coast / Midwest, nature. You can hear the crickets at night. There's a deer in my front yard, deer in the backyard type thing. The wind, the air smelled different. It felt different. The leaves, I could hear the leaves. And everything sounded and smelled and felt very different. I heard things that I wouldn't normally hear. And so I was frustrated. I think that in some respects, I would say that it took that experience for me to learn that lesson. But I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to kind of see things through that lens. And that's a big part of how I'm living my life right now as well.
Well, you know what? It's sometimes we need to come to different things that get us to that point where we realize what's really important, and, I watched a thing, and I think it's called Limitless. Chris Hemsworth was in the Australian actor that played Thor. And during the course of the show, they found out that he has the brain profile on both his mom and his dad's side of somebody who will get Alzheimer's. Okay. And, here's this guy, the guy's in great shape. And, it's like, every woman's, dream guy and everything else. The guy's, a good looking guy, super rich, super successful. And all of a sudden, he's 40, but he's, about your age. And he's got a couple of young kids, and he apparently, I don't know what he's doing right now, but apparently he's taking some time off from acting because he said, for the last 10 years, all I've done is run all over the world. Yeah, my career's doing great. But, gee, now I hear, not that he's got Alzheimer's, he's still a young guy, and he can do a lot of things to prevent that, hopefully. But, sometimes, whether you're at the top of your profession, the top of the world, sometimes it just takes that realization. And I know I've had a few wake-up calls myself this year, where you just kind of say, hey, you know what you think's important may not be important, and what you don't think is that important is probably more important than you think it is,
Yep.
So, Been there. Hey, you're lucky you're realizing it a little bit younger. But hey, I want to wish you luck with this book. I know it's going to be great. I know it's going to bless a lot of people, most importantly, and that's why, with all the projects you're involved with, you took the time to write it, because I can relate, having done it a few times myself. It is a labor of love writing a book, man. It is not something you knock out in 5 minutes. It's a lot of time and a lot of resources that go into it. So thank you for doing that. People, read the book. That's why we do these interviews. For when people write books, this is somebody who's had an amazing life. He's overcome a lot of challenges. He's super successful, but he also wants to give back and give you some lessons that are going to help you in your journey. So, Jordan, I'm going to give you the last word.
Just thanks for having me on, John. It's always a privilege. It's always good to just connect, and just the good conversation is really what it's all about. And I think that's the through line of where I'm at in life, and that's been a privilege. So I appreciate it.
Well, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Soloder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.